see. What is the reason something move your right foot? Because I'm tapping to the music I'm listening to in my head. That's why. I keep a nice even music rhythm in my head, and it makes it so the rhythm of my voice comes out more methodically. Nothing methodical about it. Also, when you press on a stage, it pumps air out the front, and you can analog mark that way too. What is the structure behind? Somebody's going to have to fill that question in a little more. What is the structure behind what? That's not enough of a question to answer, but maybe you can fill in the details on that later. Teeth grinding, we already did the teeth grinding. We already did the flirting. No fair putting the same questions back. It goes, would you mind reading out loud that Lenny Darnell is doing a design human engineering workshop in Austria at the ID Institute in March 2002. Yes, I would. No, Lenny's a good guy, and Lenny has studied design engineering almost since its inception. And Lenny has followed me all over the earth. He's gone to every workshop I've done in the past 4 years. And Lenny's a very thorough guy, and he does good work. And I had people who had came to my workshop after having been in the one he did in Austria this year, and they were quite happy with it. So if it takes my recommendation to get you there, Lenny's a good trainer. I always recommend, if you get a chance to see Lenny, or you get a chance to see Chris or Ed or any of these people that have studied, Stephen, of course, and of course, what's his name put on this workshop? Gosh, I can't remember his name. Oh yes, I remember you. He does workshops too, and he does a really good job. That's poor Ronnie Ansler here. He does all this work, and I just, but he's so quiet, sits in the back, minds his own business. And the only time I saw Ronnie really get demonstrative was when Stephen was late. And he thought he might have to translate everything, and he went, "Oh my God!" He said suddenly all of his plans changed in an instant. But plans do that. But see, to me, I think that you should really get a variety of trainers, competent trainers. I would say, it's that through the society we've now certified trainers in almost every civilized country in the world, and that to me, you don't have to be very civilized to be civilized either. We have trainers in Borneo. Think about that. They don't even let white people in Borneo, and we have trainers there. that, you know, and I mean all kinds of places you wouldn't expect. There are Chinese trainers. There are trainers in Japan. There are people in Australia. We have one in Tasmania. That's a little island off the coast of Australia that doesn't quite admitted that they're part of Australia. That's where Tasmanian devils come from. You've all seen the cartoons, I'm sure. That, you know, that, I mean, it's amazing when you think about it. There are trainers in Finland, there are trainers in Norway, Austria, Russia, although they don't seem to file certificates like they're supposed to. I don't know what it is about the Russians. They really have trouble following rules. You know, that's one of the nice things about the Germans is most of them can follow the rules, or else they make up their own and follow those. Somebody sent me a thing in the mail the other day, and angry letter about somebody who was a trainer in Germany and how they felt that they had been cheated at this workshop. And I never heard of the guy, and we checked in the computer. He's never attended a course, ever. And I don't see how you could be serious about being in a field with, I mean, if Sigmund Freud was still alive, even the way I feel about him, I would still go and study with him. I mean, I would. I mean, even though Henry Hilgard, as far as I'm concerned, is kind of out there, you know, anybody who's trying to prove that only some people can be hypnotized, instead of trying to figure out how to do it with everyone, it still didn't stop me from going and studying with him. I mean, with me, I studied with Fritz and with Virginia and with Milton Erickson and with a host of people that haven't even written books. I just heard they were successful at certain things. To me, that, you know, the more people that you can study with that are successful at things, the better. But yet there are people out there who call themselves NLP trainers who have never studied with me ever. And I'm not dead yet. And I don't plan to be dead for a while. I know this is highly disappointing to a lot of people, but that's just tough shit, you know. They keep trying to kill me, but I don't die easy. I'm just like a bad penny. I just keep coming back. I mean, there were people rooting last time I was in the hospital. I dropped into a coma, but all they had to do is say the term. They said spinal tap, and I came out of the coma like a bullet and strangled the doctor. You know, I said, I got enough fucking holes in my body. You don't need to make more. And he was saying, well, we thought we should check everything. And I said, you already checked everything except what I had. I mean, you know, doing another spinal tap isn't going to help you. How many holes do I have to have in my spine for you guys to figure out what the diagnostician already told you? Because the diagnostician had already figured out what was wrong with me. I mean, I went to the Mayo Clinic. I went to all these places, and they misdiagnosed me. And I have something that's very common. Diabetes is not that uncommon of a thing. But since I had been to all of these bizarre places on the earth, they decided I had to have a rare disease. And, you know, so they stopped looking for the obvious. And to me, if there's one thing that I've learned over the years, it's look for the obvious first and look for the obscure later. That most of the time, what people really need is to stop feeling bad and to start feeling good. I know it sounds overly simplified, but all of the stuff that people go through, the immense diagnoses that I've heard, people would not be as loony as they are, even very severe schizophrenics that I've worked with, you'd be surprised they're not any nuttier than the psychiatrists. I mean, you know, psychiatrists tell me crazy fucking stuff. I mean, when I listen to it sometimes, I mean, it sounds as nutty as a fruitcake. I mean, one psychiatrist that I met literally took me on a tour of a hospital. It was a private hospital in New York. And, you know, they have 90 beds, and this guy is supposedly quite famous in the psychiatric community. Although I have to admit, I'd never heard of him. I was hired to work with one client, and when I got there, I did some work with the client, and they really weren't that, they weren't that messed up. They were in this private hospital, and when I asked them, I said, you know, what are you doing here? And they said, well, you know, they said, you know, I took a whole bunch of pills, and I drank a lot to get high, but I guess I took too much because I almost died, and so they said I was suicidal. And I said, oh. And I said, you weren't trying to kill yourself? And he said, no, I just was trying to get high because I didn't feel very good. And I said, well, what were you feeling bad about? And he said, my life. And I said, that's a lot. And he said, well, yeah. He said, but, you know, I've been getting high every day for like 2 years. He said, it's all I did. He said, I got high, and I got high. And he said, and now I'm in this hospital, and what do? They give me drugs. You know, and he said, but I don't like these drugs. The drugs I took were better. I said, these drugs really make me feel bad, and they make my mind blurry. I can't think right. And so I told the doctors, I said, look, what we're going to do is we're going to keep this guy here, and what we're going to do is slowly take him off of the psychotropic drugs. They were giving him something called Halophene. And Halophene is really strong. I mean, excuse me, because I know I gave some to his doctor. And, well, it seemed only fair, don't you think? The doctor was giving him drugs. They must be good for you. So I gave the doctor some. At least that's what I told him. It's the old placebo effect. I just took some, opened up, left the packages on the table, and when he drank his coffee, I said, so you think Halophene is good for people? And he said, well, of course, you know, given that they have the proper diagnosis. And I said, well, I gave you some in your coffee. And he freaked out, and he looked at the table and saw the package, because I had broken into the medical cabinet. Another good thing about lock picking is you can always get what you want. And he totally freaked out, and then he began to just go through this whole thing, and he said, oh, I'm going to have my stomach pumped. And I thought, well, that'll keep him busy for a while. And I said, before you get your stomach pumped, I said, if this is such a terrible thing, how can you give it to other people? And he said, well, they're sick. And I said, well, he's not sick. I said, you know, the guy said he took too many drugs. He wasn't trying to kill himself. And he said, he's just in denial. And I said, so are you. I said, you're denying that what he's telling you is the truth. When it really doesn't matter whether it's true or not. The only thing you need to do is to get him off all these drugs, and to make it so that when he's not on drugs, he doesn't feel so bad. He wants to take them, you know, and at least makes some conscious decision about what he sticks in his body. I said, if you think people should take things against their will, then you're in the same position he is, because I think this will be a good experience for you to know what you're giving people, to know how badly it can feel, how much it can blur your mind. And he went, I'm getting getting dizzy. And I said, double that feeling. And he said, I'm feeling queasy. And I said, yes, you are. And I said, queasier and queasier. And I said, but is your eyesight started to blur? Have your thoughts started to slow down at all? Are you having trouble understanding the outside world? Because and he started freaking. You know, nothing like a straight person. You do that to people in San Francisco, and they'd talk to you normally, you know. But this guy was in upstate New York. He wasn't ready for this, you know. And I mean, he actually sat down in a chair, and he goes, he looks at me, and he says, do you realize halophene has a 6-month half-life? And I said, a half-life? And he said, yeah. He said, it takes us 6 months to get totally out of your system. And I said, then how could you be giving it to people and being surprised that they're still fucked up? I mean, if you're giving somebody a drug that takes 6 months to get out of your system, well, my guess is, you know, because what they did is they brought this guy in. They said he might be suicidal. They started pumping him full of drugs and then going, he's acting abnormally. Major surprise. Every time I was with people and they took drugs, they acted abnormally. You know, which for some of them was pretty normal. But see, to me, the one thing I wanted to get rid of, and then when I looked at him and I said I was lying, he wouldn't believe me. How's that for a bind? Not a double bind, but a good bind. I said, I just put the box there because I was going to use the placebo effect because I want you to stop giving this guy this drugs. Because they were mixing halophene with, get this, another drug called Sinequan. And even in those days, I thought they only gave people in jail Sinequan. Sinequan is a very bad drug, and it really it screws up your decision-making processes. It's worse than most of the street drugs that people take, and it doesn't get you nearly as high. It just makes you feel bad, and then, of course, you'll have lots to tell your psychiatrist. But they were under the impression, because Sinequan is another maintenance drug. The purpose of giving people Sinequan is to keep them from getting really upset. And nothing will upset you more than being locked up for a few years for no reason. I mean, think about it. I mean, these poor people inside these hospitals, they get locked up, and instead of helping them, they pump them full of drugs. And when people say, Jesus Christ, I want to get the fuck out of here, they write down violent behavior. And they go, well, maybe when you're well. And they go, I'm well enough to leave. And they go, he's in the state of denial. And they go, I am not in a state of denial. And they go, deep denial. But you see, to me, the same thing was happening as what the bind that I put the shrink in. But anyway, once he started laughing, once I told him that he really wasn't on drugs and that I was trying to prove a point that we needed to take this guy, he got in there in the first place because he was supposedly taking drugs, and now we're giving him more drugs. Maybe the thing to do is to undrug him. And so we set up a thing so that over the next 2 weeks we would slowly take down the dosage of his drugs. And that's all I had was 2 weeks, and I had to go to New York and come back. But then he said, would you like a tour of our facility? And I said, oh, yeah. I said, I'd love to see what other nuts you have in this place. So he took me around, and he introduced me to the patients. And the more we talked with each other, the more I decided that This guy was out of his fucking mind. Because he asked me, he said, how do you feel about Carl Jung? And I said, I don't really have any feelings about Carl Jung. He's dead. You know, I mean, I've seen some of his books, but, you know, I have no feelings about dead people. I just really don't, you know. I feel about them, I feel they're dead. And I said, he said, well, his work, how do you feel about his work? And I said, well, let's take it in perspective. This guy, you know, this guy lived a long time ago before we knew about things like biochemistry. We didn't know about things like biochemistry. And it's all, and he was a very prolific writer, but a lot of the stuff that he wrote about, you know, really, if you stop and think about it, is just made sense in the time and place historically, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense now. His theory of archetypes, you know, was blatantly said, if you took depression from one person, it appeared in another person. I mean, that's the ultimate in symptom substitution. Now, I like the idea. I think it's a cool idea. Yeah, I practice it, but I don't think it happens by itself. Otherwise, there wouldn't be enough mental diseases for new people. Just think of the increase in the population. Nobody could have any mental disorders. They'd all be taken. I mean, it's just kind of a goofy idea. But he said to me, he said, oh, I'm a very strict Jungian. And I thought, what in the world is a strict Jungian? I mean, what could this possibly mean? And he said, well, he said, Jungians believe that you have to cathart to be able to get rid of your problems. And I said, cathart? I mean, because I know what that means. That means you go ape shit. You know, that's what it means. That's like these Gestalt therapists that have you go back and relive childhood traumas. Like once wasn't enough. Because if you go back, you know, and think about what Gestalt therapists had people do. I tried this, and I got news for you. It didn't make me any saner. You know, what do? You hallucinate yourself or some fucking dead relative, you know, or maybe a relative who's not dead. You hallucinate them in a chair and talk to them. Now, here's the part that scares me, because I saw Fritz do this. Fritz had this guy, he said to this guy, the very first thing I ever saw him do, he says to this guy, he says, the guy is sitting there, and he said, I notice your hands in a fist. And the guy looked down, and he said, yeah, and he said, now beat your fist. And the guy goes like this, and Fritz said, now say you're angry. And the guy goes, I'm angry. He goes, yell it. And he goes, I'm angry. And Fritz goes, at whom? Now, that's kind of a trick, if you ask me. He wasn't angry before he did that. But if you act like you're angry, and then he starts asking you about it, and the guy goes, I'm my mother. And Fritz goes, so put your mother in the chair. And I, of course, thought his mother must have been in the room, right? But, oh, no, this guy turns around and looks at this fucking empty chair and says, Mom, he goes, why did you leave me? And Fritz goes, what did she say? And he goes, well, she said she couldn't help dying. And Fritz says, tell her that's not good enough. And I'm starting to wonder who the crazy person is in the fucking room. What does he mean? Tell her who? There's nobody in the fucking chair. And this guy looks over and starts crying. He goes, oh, Mom, that's not good enough. I had to grow up without you. And this guy's crying. And everybody in the room is crying, and I start laughing. And Fritz looks at me like, takes a drag off his cigarette, and he goes, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm your editor from the publishing company," right? And I said, "And as far as I can tell, there's nobody in that fucking chair." And he said, "You do not understand Gestalt therapy." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well," I said, you just continue. Maybe I'll figure it out." So this guy turns around and he goes, "Tell your mother you're angry with her." And he goes, "I'm angry." And he goes, "Beat your fist." And the guy beats your fist. And he says, "And hit her." And this guy goes up and starts pounding on this fucking chair wildly until he totally exhausts himself. And then Fritz says to him, "And how do you feel?" And the guy goes, "I feel better." Then what? What, you know, I mean, because what, he beat up a hallucination? You don't have to be tough to do that, you know. So here's this guy yelling and screaming at somebody who's dead and not there, as far as I could tell. I'm not a trance medium. I don't spend time talking to dead people, although it does feel that way sometimes. So I had to try it. I mean, I have to admit, I try everything, even though it appeared to me that hallucinating dead people and talking to them is not really my definition of mental health. I mean, think about it. If you were a doctor prescribing things and you go, "You seem a little depressed. I want you to go out and talk to 2 dead people and beat them up." Now, I don't know about you guys. This is not the formula I would use for mental health. But I'm open-minded. I gave it a shot. So they broke everybody into little groups, and these people there were supposed to be the finest and the brightest of all Gestalt therapists. And they sat down, and they were going around, and they said, and they had somebody who went and they fought with themselves. That was something else. They had put themselves in the chair, they argued with themselves, beat the crap out of themselves, right? And I kept looking, because the more I looked, the more they weren't there. But then the therapist had them switch chairs back and forth and argue with themselves. Like you can't do that in your head, you know? And it was just really kind of wacky. But then he did this thing where he turned around to me and he said, "How about you? Are you willing to try this?" And I said, "Okay, I'm willing to try anything." And he said, "What makes you feel bad?" And I said, "Stupidity." And he said, "Well," he said, "have you ever done anything stupid?" I said, "I do stupid stuff all the time. I just try to notice it." And he said, "I want you to put yourself in that chair and tell yourself you're stupid." So I went and sat in the chair and said, "I'm stupid." And he said, no, "You're not doing this right." He said, "Stay in this chair and just see yourself in the other chair." Well, I grew up in the 60s. I can do that. I took lots of drugs. I looked over and I hallucinated myself. And he said, "Tell yourself you're angry." And I said, "I'm angry." And he said, "Tell him about what?" And I said, "About doing stupid things." And he said, "Say it louder." And I said, "Say what louder?" And he said, "Say you're angry louder." And I said, "I am angry louder." And he said, "Say you're really angry." I went, "I'm really angry." And he said, "Now hit him." So I smacked the therapist as fucking hard as I could, right up the side of the head. After 15 fucking years of doing martial arts, I can do that in a wheel kick. This guy flew out of his chair, rolled over backwards 5 times, and hit the wall. And I have to admit, I felt a lot better. I thought, shit, this stuff works. But you see, the point I'm trying to make is that if you engage in ridiculous things because you have a theory that they work, it doesn't necessarily mean that the theory is sound. That, to me, and this guy from the hospital did the wackiest thing. We're walking along, and suddenly this guy is like arguing with me, like I really give a shit, And he says, obviously, he said, you have not studied Reich. And I said, well, I read his books. I said, I couldn't study with him. He's dead. I said, but, I like the concept of the Orgon box. I said, I went and sat in one, but it didn't do anything for me. I said, a couple of shots of tequila, that'll turn my sexual energy on. But sitting in some fucking wooden box with brass corners just did nothing for me. I'm sorry. I tried. I said, but I liked the idea enough that I sat in there as long as I could. I even made pictures of things that should help, but it didn't do any good, because if you hallucinate somebody, you can't fuck them, And this guy said, you're making fun of really great men. And I said, yeah, I think we should do that. I'm hoping people will do that with me. It's actually, I think it's kind of silly. I discovered most of this stuff. That to me, the only reason I did is because I just don't believe that we know enough. And when people come in and tell me these stories about having been in all this therapy and explain to me the stuff they did, oh God, I had this woman that went through so many forms of torture, I couldn't believe it. Electroshock treatment, multi-megabin vitamins. This guy came over and injected her with vitamins. This is not the natural way to take vitamins. Vitamins come from things you consume. You don't just take the vitamins and, they said, well, God invented hypodermic needles, so therefore it must be natural. Came over and injected her with high doses of vitamin B12, which I think is one of the coolest placebos because of the color of it. I don't think it actually does anything. But when you look at it, it's pink and it glows, and it's kind of like, those necklaces, you break the thing and they glow in the dark. Well, vitamin B12 kind of looks like that, and so it must do something because it's pretty. I think we should take more things that are really psychedelic looking and then, just psychedelic placebos, But this guy, then he proceeds to tell me, he said, obviously I don't understand the fact that when people have bad experiences, they store the pain inside. And I looked at him and I went, where? And he said, in their muscles, in their body, in their brain, in every neuron, in every cell, actually in the personality itself. And I went, personality itself? And he went, oh yes. And then he opens this closet up. And this closet is filled with things like baseball bats, canes, all kinds of objects, and these mattresses and cushions. And he pulls them out and he said, let me show you how this works. He sets this big cushion up. He takes a hold of this baseball bat. He goes into this position and begins to hyperventilate and then starts screaming, mommy, and beating this fucking pillow. This guy's 45 years old. He's got a medical degree. He's a psychoanalyst. He's got a thing from Harvard and a thing from Yale Medical School on the wall. And this motherfucker is drooling out of the corner of his mouth, psychotically beating this pillow in the name of mental health. And I sat there watching him do it, and I was like, you know, stay away from me, motherfucker. I'll take that mother thing and I'll shove it right up your ass. I'm not as defenseless as a fucking pillow. But I mean, the guy didn't turn on me, but he turned around and he was like, and I said, well, do you feel better now? And he said, yes. And I said, how often have you done this? And he said, I do this twice a day, every day. And I said, for how long have you done this? And he said, I've been doing this for at least 10 years. And I said, then isn't it empty yet? Or isn't it in fact true that you're learning to do it better every day? You're learning to have more rage. And then I looked him straight in the eye and I said, do you have any children? And he said, yes. And I said, have you hit them? And he went, and I said, you have, haven't you? I said, did you hit them when they were young? Or have you started hitting them more? And he looked at me and he went, who are you? And I said, I'm somebody who tells the truth as I see it. If you learn to be more violent, you will not become less violent. You will become more violent. If you learn to hit furniture, who's next? Bioenergetics, where you go into these deep hyperventilating trances and whack mattresses. I don't think you want to associate mattresses and violence together. That's a bad combo. And see, well, it is. Think about it, you know. And you certainly don't want to associate violence. They use canes. They have you whack things with canes. I actually had a client that was referred to me because this guy walked into a drug store and he leaned on the cane and there was this old lady taking too long and he went into a blind rage and beat her senseless with a cane. And when he told the judge, I have no memory of doing this. He had no criminal record. He'd never been in a fight in his life. He had total amnesia for it. And I know the judge, so he asked me if I would hypnotize him and find out if the guy was lying. And I first thing I did is when the guy came in and told me like that, I looked at him and I said, have you ever done bioenergetics? And the guy goes, oh, yes. He goes, I go to bioenergetics twice a week. And I thought, violence and a cane. All he needed to do was to be frustrated, put his hand on the cane, and the next thing you know, the guy's beating the crap out of some poor old lady. You have to realize that, to me, the bottom line is you either take things apart or you put things back together. See, today what we tried to do is to take something apart this morning. I wanted you guys to take your bad feelings, take them apart from the pictures they're associated with, so those pictures can never bother you ever again. Because I don't care if your parents were mean to you, you know, especially if they're dead. If they're being mean to you now, you're old enough that you should be able to do something about it. You know, I had one woman that came in. Listen to this. This woman was a medical doctor. And in fact, she was one of these eye doctors that does surgery on eyes. And I actually met her because she did eye surgery at the zoo. I volunteered at the San Francisco Zoo for a while, and she came by and did eye surgery on the animals. And years later, she read one of my books, and she said, oh, I need help. So she called up, reminded me that I had met her, and asked if I would see her. When she came in, she sat down, and she told me the following things. She told me, and I mean, at first I thought, Jesus, this woman is allowed to take a knife and cut human beings? Excuse me. Here she told me, she said, well, she said, I have a terrible personal problem. She said, I wake up at night and I find myself and I'm not at home. But yet I go to bed in my pajamas, I wake up, I'm in totally clothed, and I'm in somewhere, sometimes an hour or 2 hours from my house, and sometimes it's 5, 6 hours later, and I have no memory of what I've done in the meanwhile. And she said, but typically I'm bruised all over my body, and she said, and I have cuts. And she said, and I have no idea what's happening. And I thought, I said, this is pretty weird. Last thing you want is somebody who's a surgeon to have lapses in their experience. I mean, you know, that's like one time I was having, somebody did something, I had gotten something exploded. I have problems with that. But I had gotten slivers of wood that had stuck in my arm, and this doctor was going to take them out, and he said it wouldn't be a problem, and he said, do you want a local anesthetic? And I said, no thanks, I'll make my own. And he started, but I don't like to look at them when they do that, because if I look at people cutting me, I think maybe I should cut them. But I was looking away, and the very first thing the guy says is, oops. Now that's not what I want to hear from a guy who's cutting my arm open. And I turned around, and I looked at him, and I said, oops, and he said, oh, no, it's not you. He said, I just remembered something about what I was doing this morning. And I said, I hope it wasn't surgery. And he said, oh, no. He said, it's I forgot to lock the house when I left. And I said, you're thinking about locking your house when you're cutting my arm open? I said, how about paying attention? But this woman who had these lapses in experience, and she tells me this absolutely and totally nonchalantly. I said, okay. I said, I can probably make it so you don't do this anymore. I said, but before I do this, I said, I want to ask you a question. I said, how long has this been going on? And she says, since I was a teenager. Now, this woman went to medical school. Then she went and learned the specialty of doing eye surgery. This is a very technical stuff. She even she went to a veterinarian school and learned to do eye surgery on animals. And she learned to put glass eyes in people and to do fine nerve surgery, all of these things. She's around doctors all the time. And meanwhile, in the middle of the night, she's disappearing here and there, showing up at the hospital with cuts and bruises all over, and nobody is saying anything. And I asked her, I said, have you ever tried any therapy? And she said, I saw a psychiatrist, and the doctor told me not to worry about it. It would probably go away on its own. This woman was 52 years old when I worked with her. That means she spent all of these years doing it and accepting it like your life is supposed to be like this. This is how hard it was to treat her. I put her in a trance, and I said, I think what's going on in your life sucks. And I want to ask your unconscious the following. Does it agree with me? And I got a yes signal. And I said, okay, now you're her unconscious. You're in fucking charge. I said, is there any rational reason why this needs to be happening to her? I got a no answer. I said, good. Then are you willing to have it stop today and for the rest of her life? I got a yes signal. And I said, okay, I'm leaving this your responsibility. And I told her, I said, I want your conscious mind to know that your unconscious mind has agreed, and I'm going to tell you that every time you go to bed at night and sleep, you'll sleep through the whole night, you'll wake up wide awake and alert, you'll never think about this anymore, it won't bother you because you're never going to do it again. And so far, she hasn't. And that's been 20 years. She doesn't even practice medicine anymore, but she still calls me on the phone because I told her when she left, I said, I want you to make sure you call me on a regular basis and let me know that everything is okay. And even after all these years, she still calls me. I didn't say for the first few years. I should have been more explicit, but it's only a phone call. But her name is Gladys, and Gladys calls me on a regular basis twice a year and tells me everything is okay. And then says, do you think everything is going to stay that way? And I said, absolutely. I said, I don't care if you live to be 150. That's your business. But as long as you don't hurt yourself. Now, lots of people would say that, we need to find out the reason why this happened. Now, the only thing Gladys needed was to stop it. And with lots and lots of people, this is the case. That if a behavior serves a function, but hurting yourself is not a function, as far as I can tell. The lady with numb feet, that seemed pretty functional. They could now get numb and she didn't have to wash the dishes all the time. Now, sometimes you could wash the dishes and sometimes you could have numb feet. Or you could do what I did, which is to tell her, look, if you tell your husband no, you won't have to have your feet numb at all. And she looked at me and she said, well, okay. I said, give it a try. I said, this time, arbitrarily, even if you feel like washing the dishes, say no anyway. You can always change your mind later, just so you know you can. I said, okay. And I said, let's practice. I said, just walk out in the waiting room. Her husband was out there. I want you to walk out there and tell him no. And don't even tell him about what. And she said, okay. I said, just go out there, have fun. Just walk out and go, no, I'm not going to, and come back in. And she walked out and she went, no, I'm not going to. And he said, you're not going to what? And she said, shut up, and walked back in. And she said, that felt really good. And I said, well, I'll do it once more. She walked back out and said, no, I'm not going to, and shut up. Walked back out. Didn't even give him a chance to say anything. He came and knocked on the door, and I opened the door, and I said, well, now what do you want? She already told you no. And he said, well, I just don't know what she was saying no to. And I said, yeah, they all say that, and slammed the door. He was just somewhat confused, but that's okay. Little confusion can go a long way. Now, this afternoon, I want you to add another piece. I want you to go back with the same person that you worked with. Because, you see, there's a very important piece here, which is being able to structure post-hypnotic suggestions so that they function in a way where you begin to design so that you have a machine now, which will take bad feelings and add to them some hope. But see, to me, that's not enough. Now you have to get out of it commitment, and the other thing is conviction. Now, see, it's one thing to believe that something something's going to be the case. It's another thing to be absolutely convinced about it. See, I've discovered that people believe the sun is coming up, but they're really convinced they don't want to stick their head in a plastic bag and try and breathe. See, the difference is one doesn't require much behavior. Sun comes up, you get up, or you don't. But the other one is it requires that you don't engage in certain behaviors, and you do engage in things of making sure they don't happen. Because to me, one of the things I want people to do is to start behaving in new ways. It's not enough to just go, oh, well, I don't feel bad about being a phobic of an elevator. One of these people here asked me, because I use it, when I test neurolinguistic programmers, I test their resolve by finding out have they done more than just read. Because you see, if all you've done is read, then curing somebody of a phobia of seeing their face is a real problem. Because that's always what I do to mess with people's minds. For years and years ago, I always tested trainers. I'd go, what do you do if somebody has a phobia of seeing their face? And if the only way they could figure out how to get out of a phobia is the one I had taught them, where you see yourself watching yourself go through your phobia, then they were stuck. They didn't know what to do. But every one of you, the first day, shouldn't have been asking this question, because I've already showed you how to do it. The lady had a phobia of public speaking, and I never had her make a picture of herself. I just had her take a good feeling and take the bad feeling and run it backwards. Because, you see, it doesn't matter what system you make change in, whether you make it with voices, whether you make it with pictures, or whether you make it with feeling. Ultimately, you have to get it in every system for it to last. It's only a question of which one you start with. Because if you start making it so people feel different and learn to hold a good feeling, well, then when they make a picture of themselves, they're not going to feel bad because they're already feeling good. You see? And the reason you make it so it spins so fast, it goes by itself, whether you do it with movies about things. See, if you have a bad feeling and you take the pictures and you spin it backwards, you're not going to feel the same way you feel. And if you spin it backwards to the fact where it's blurred out, it literally makes it so that when you look at any one of those events, it doesn't make you feel the same way, because you don't normally view your memories backwards. Since you do something different in your mind, you do something different in your body. Now, the thing is it's not enough to just create voids, because we're not trying to empty people. We're trying to make it so that we fill people up. So this is how the next piece works. What I want you guys to do is to just try something with your imagination. If you stop and think, okay, so we'll use you as an example because you were my partner. Okay, if you hold up one hand and think about feeling bad about those things, because that's who you were. Okay, if you look at yourself as the person who would feel bad about that. Okay, now on the other hand, I want you to think about being a person who doesn't feel bad about those things, and in fact feels good about new things, right? So that you compare and look at the difference between the two. Now, if you take your hands up and you go, look, this is the kind of person I can become. You can become more optimistic. You can become happier. You can have all this spare time to get more things done. You can have times to be able to think of wonderful thoughts, to create even more good feelings. And then you look back and see yourself feeling bad about all these petty little things. Then very slowly, what I want you to do is start to bring your hands together. That's right. Just look at one, look at the other, and slowly start to pull your hands together. Because as you get them close enough, what's going to happen is they're going to begin to merge into something totally different. And if you let your hands come even slower and faster, and slower and faster, and as they get closer and closer, I want you to watch that image begin to meld into one new image. And at the moment that they blend into one image, I want you to take a deep breath and literally pull the picture right inside your chest. That's right. Take a deep breath. Let them meld together. Pull it inside your chest and let it feel it come inside you. Go, ah, a little tingling down the midline. And let the feeling spread throughout your body and begin to tell yourself that the future is going to be wonderful. Now, if you just take a moment and look at him, you can glow just like that. Because I want you to glow forth into the future and begin to seize new possibilities. And I want you to let your imagination now begin to run away with you. I want you to begin to see new things. Because, see, all this time opens up the possibility. Perhaps you'd like to take up a little music, a little art. Perhaps you'd like to try selling cars. Perhaps you'd like to give some public lectures. Perhaps you'd like to go back and look at chemistry and see if you can't invent some new chemical thing. You know, there's all kinds of things we need to chemically get rid of nowadays, like anthrax and bin Laden. Or as I like to call him, Bin Liner. That, to me, well, his name kind of looks like that. And I was putting the trash in the bin one day, and I thought, Bin Liner. To me, that if you let your imagination, and take a moment now, and let your unconscious do the same. If you take this good feeling and let it start to spin inside your body, suddenly you can begin to spin a new movie forward. And let your unconscious let you dream a dream where you start to see some of the possibilities of things that perhaps you haven't let yourself do. And I know it's a very German and organized thing to do, to be limited in certain ways and unstructured in others. But you know, you can unstructure the structured things in a very structured way. And the more you do, the more freedom you're going to begin to experience about the range of what it is that you can do. And that's really what counts here. What counts is that you begin to open up the future so that you begin to read about different things and you begin to try different things. You let things go in different directions, you'd be surprised how much stuff you can make up. I mean, when I started out, I didn't start out to set up a whole field. Only thing I did was to set out to prove that what Virginia Satir was doing, other people could learn to do just as well, if not better. That all of her unconscious intuitions, things she'd learned to do through experience, had a structure to it. And even though it appeared magical, I thought other people could do that magic. And I thought the same thing about Milton. Then I planned to go back to the job I really had. I was a physicist by trade, and I planned to go back and build more interesting machines. I even bought an R&D company, and we did do that for a while. But then I discovered there was more and more magic that could be done, because once I understood these things, what I understood is that most of the field of psychology was looking for how you got broken. Your mommy didn't love you enough. You know, these ideas that you wanted to overthrow your father as an authority figure, and all of this crap about how if your arms and legs were closed, the ideas couldn't get in. And all this crap about interpreting behavior and interpreting dreams. This is all too fucking complicated. What people need to feel is that, make it so that it's not a bad thing to be compulsed if you're compulsed to be more and more free. If you're compulsed to have better and better feelings. If you're compulsed to do more and more successful things, no matter what you do. I don't care if you're an investment person. I mean, I have lots of guys. I just did my personal training course. I had 3 guys that were there because they wanted to play the stock market better. But you see, it's still an intuitive thing. You're still taking in mass quantities of information and making decisions. And if right now you begin to make some new decisions, let your mind wander places it doesn't normally go. It's okay. It's only your imagination. So if you're not somebody who draws and paints, let your imagination wander and take the good feeling and spin it and imagine painting and drawing. Just to find out if it's something you want to try. To make good decisions, you have to start with good feelings, and then you can explore the ranges of activities. If you've never been diving, maybe you want to try swimming and being Jacques Cousteau. Keep your hands away from the eels, I guarantee you. That's right. And don't feed the sharks. You know, they get a little carried away. You know, as long as you don't act like a dead seal, though, they won't eat you. When you're down under the ocean and you see a shark, all you do is you watch it, and they'll swim around you 3 times to check out if you're dead. And it's programmed into them genetically. If you turn around and watch them, they go, this guy's not dead, and on the way they go. Except for hammerhead sharks. If you have hammerhead sharks, kill them. And just carry a bang stick with you. They're the meanest thing you've ever seen. I don't know what it is with them, but yet I've seen divers who go up and put their hands on the front of them and swim with them, because the sharks seem to know who's afraid of them and who's not. And Richard's not afraid of them if I have a bang stick. It's a 44 Magnum shell and a 4-foot pole. And somehow or other, I feel more assured having that. Jacques Cousteau likes a camera. I like a bang stick. Whatever makes you feel good. I found out because the nice bang stick, not only it's a 44 shell, but it also shoots 3 cubic yards of air inside. The shark blows its stomach out of its mouth so it can't bite you. Doesn't even kill them. They float to the top with their mouth open, sit there for a while, and then pretty soon the air leaks out and they can swim away. And somewhere in their mind, they make a picture of Richard and say, stay the fuck away from him. But you see, this is all you have to do, is to learn what's dangerous and what's not. We do it all the time when we're growing up, but somewhere along the line, we begin to think that things are dangerous because we can get our feelings hurt. Well, I'm sorry if people get their feelings hurt, but not that much. Actually, what I'm sorry about is that it stops them from doing all kinds of things, from telling their children they love them, from sitting down and playing games with their kids, from being able to enjoy their spouse and do things and go places together without having to worry about all this stuff, and from inducing bad feelings in each other. I see husbands and wives make each other feel horrible for no reason. It doesn't make any sense. Husbands come home and their wives look at them and go, I suppose you're feeling tired. And they go, yeah. Tired. And they go, I suppose you're feeling so tired, all you're going to do is sit on the couch and watch TV. And they go, sit on the couch. Watch TV. If they're that programmable, tell them what you want them to do. Do a thing. I mean, you don't have to look at his dirty clothes on the floor and feel bad. You can look at his dirty clothes on the floor and go, he must be naked. And if every time you find dirty clothes, you go in and molest him, I got news for you. He'll start picking his clothes up, or he'll start throwing them all over the place. Either way, you win. I mean, to me, as soon as you let your imagination search through good possibilities, where you begin to go where the people's brains don't normally go, you're going to find there's lots of good places. And the more of those good places you go into, the more you're going to see that there's possibilities that you haven't seen. The sky's the limit. That's what I say. That probably doesn't translate, but it's a great concept. Means you hide the limits, right? But the limits are totally without the bounds and the reach. See, Einstein said something about the universe that I like. They asked him, they said, Dr. Einstein, they said, what do you think the most important thing about the universe is? If you could teach people one thing about the universe, what would it be? And he said, I would teach them that the universe is a limitless, boundless, and friendly place. He said, there's some real assholes living in it, but the universe itself is complete friendly. Because the more you understand it, the more the universe works for you. Now, me, I don't like the term the universe. I just like the term universe, because I kind of think of it as a living organism. I figure if something the size of my brain can have consciousness, certainly something the size of the universe must. But I mean, a lot of people think that's a pantheistic, pagan view of the world. And I say, yep. So, how you doing? If he gets any happier, his head's going to explode. Hi. And they'll say, you know what people will say? They'll say, what did you do in the workshop today? And then you'll have to explain it. And you'll go, You know what I always tell people? I go, nothing. People ask me what I do for a living. I tell them I'm a mortician. People don't ask you about your work. I do this on planes all the time. You get the funniest look from people. People go, I'm into telecommunications. I work with a company and blah, 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 blah. And here's my card. And I go, thank you. And they go, what do you do for a living? And I look at them and I go, well, I'm in a business where there's always clients. And they go, really? And I go, an endless supply. I said, we don't even have to advertise. And they go, really? And they go, what do you do? I go, I'm a mortician. And then I look at their fingers. I go, nice fingers. I can do fingers like that. And then they go, well, that must be interesting work. And they open up the magazine and look at it. And I go, have you thought about when you die? Such a great question. Have you thought about when you're dead? And they go, well, my family has a plot. And I said, yeah, you have a place to be. But what are you going to look like when you get there? Such a weird thing what they do. They do the strangest things to dead people. I mean, they try to make them look like they're alive. Have you ever been to a funeral? I think that's kind of weird myself, People go up and go, gee, doesn't he look like himself? No, he's dead. He looks like himself dead. But they make it so you have big smiles and red faces and lots of color in your face. They actually spray paint people so they look like that. So, I mean, it's something. I mean, I had a relative who died, and he actually looked better at his funeral than he ever looked in his whole life. I mean, this guy was gray and pasty, and he smoked all the time. He had cigarette things all over him, and he was always missing teeth. And when he was dead, he had a perfect set of teeth, and he looked marvelous. They bought him a new suit. He finally, for 20 years, I was telling him he should buy a new suit, and now he has one. And I went to the funeral, and I looked at him, and I said, God, I said, look at my Uncle Bob. God, he looks great, Death is really good for you, I said, I looked at my other relatives. I said, you should die too. You could look this good. People don't think that's funny. You're not supposed to make jokes at funerals. But see, to me, the thing about grief can get out of control as anything. I've met people who have grieved for people for 25 and 30 years and felt horrible and didn't get on with their lives. And to me, this is not the right thing. And part of it is really very simple. If people associate with bad memories and disassociate from good memories, then they feel horrible about somebody. But you see, if you associate with the good memories and disassociate with the events of their death and the bad things, then you'll always have really good memories and really good thoughts about people. I mean, my grandfather was a lunatic, and he died pretty young. He was 106, I think. He pissed everybody off. He smoked 4 packs of Camel cigarettes a day, and he actually sometimes had 2 and 3 cigarettes lit. He'd light them and put them in the ashtray. Then he'd light another one, and then he'd smoke out of this one. And his doctors kept telling him, they started when he was like 50 or something, they're saying, if you don't quit smoking, because he not only smoked cigarettes, he smoked cigars, as well. It wasn't bad enough if he smoked cigarettes. Then he would go outside and smoke a cigar, because my grandmother wouldn't let him smoke cigars in the house, because he didn't buy like nice cigars. He bought like the worst fucking cigars you could find. The kind that when you smoke them, you can smell it on something like 2, 3, 5 years later. If somebody smokes one of those in a house, the smell will never leave. You have to burn the house to the ground. And then even when you walk by, you can smell the cigars long after you smell the ashes. But the thing about him is that he had one of the best attitudes about life, is that when the doctor told him, you had to do this or you'll die, he looked at him and he said, we'll see who dies. So we'll see who dies. And as he was proud, he said, I buried 3 doctors who told me to quit smoking, and not another one will now. I just wonder if they were dead when he buried them. That's the part I wonder about. Because this old man had an attitude. He was a small guy. I only came up to about here on me, but man, he had attitude. He understood what attitude was. And see, and to me it's really important because if you don't install attitude in people, they don't stand a chance. Now I want you to try something because I found out some interesting things by studying the human body. That I have not only studied the human body in terms of the endocrine system and in terms of hormones and Western medicine. I took a good long look at acupuncture. Actually, when I grew up in Chinatown, I studied martial arts and I also studied acupuncture. We did not know this was out of the ordinary because we lived there. We didn't know any better. And I was faced with the great dilemma. There was only 5 Jews there, so we couldn't really have a gang. There wasn't enough of us. So we either had to become Italian or we had to become Chinese. And the Italians always lost the gang fight, so I decided Chinese was the better choice. So I joined the Chinese gang, and the Chinese gang there, you know, they were very accepting of this, you know, they just went, okay, you know, I said, whatever you say, you know, and we would go and we learned martial arts, and then we learned about the structure of acupuncture points. Later on in life, when I started working with clients, I started noticing things about them. Because I started noticing that a lot of the people, like when I met Gregory Bateson. Gregory Bateson, who is probably the father of the field heuristics, and more than probably anybody else, with the possible exception of you know, Moshe Feldenkrais, my work is based on work that Gregory Bateson did. He's the guy that came up with the double bind theory of schizophrenia. He's the guy that, you know, did all the stuff about logical levels and logical types, where he sorted that out. But Bertrand Russell went, you know, there are logical levels and logical types, and so statements like this sentence is false is utterly confusing and can never be resolved. Yeah, you can resolve it. It's a bad sentence. As soon as you comment on the sentence, you're out of the loop. See, double binds are escapable. Double binds don't mean you're stuck forever. As soon as you comment on something rather than participate in it, all the rules change. I try to teach people this when they negotiate. And sometimes you have to negotiate with a client. Sometimes you negotiate, you know, with businesses. But it doesn't matter. You can always get out of things because whenever you're cornered, comment on it. When people come in and use some technique, like somebody just recently was negotiating about their company. Their company was involved by being taken over by some of the investors. They invested money and then were trying to do a stock takeover and throw this guy out of his own company that he had founded and designed all the software for. And I told him, I said, look, you know, said, when these people come in and tell you, you have no choice but to accept their offer, look at them and go, ooh, I'm cornered. And then don't say another fucking word. And then they will have to do something. Just look at them like this. Because of what you do is rather than respond to something and say, well, no, you can offer me more money, and then they'll say, we don't have to. Instead, if you go, ooh, I'm cornered, then suddenly you're not, because you're commenting on what's going on instead. When they use techniques where they say, well, we'll be able to leverage this stock and within a certain amount of time and blah, 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 blah. And then you look at them and you go, ooh, that was really cool. I feel bad while you're saying that. And then they'll go, well, we're not trying to make you feel bad. And you go, ooh, that was good too. Because when you comment on their behavior rather than communicate about the content, no one can ever crush you in any argument about anything. Because, see, and you don't even have to describe yourself as being in a meta position. You can describe yourself as being in less than a complimenting position. You go, oh, I'm beaten down now. I said, boy, you got me cornered. A little bit more pressure and I'm sure I'll break. Try it. And what happens is people get totally frustrated behind this. They'll literally go, well, I don't want to break you. And you go, okay, then what are you going to offer me? And they go, and you go, well, wait a second. You go, I have a suggestion. Instead of trying to take over my company, why don't we find out how we can both make the most amount of money in the long run? Because you think you'd be better at making decisions. And I said, I'm pretty sure that I believe I'm better at making those decisions. So you can spend your time trying to manipulate me, or we could spend our time trying to figure out how to sell our product. Of course, that might not interest you. You might be more interested in winning. Of course, I've already described both sides as winning, so that means they're stuck. Because now I'm talking about the process, I'm not talking about the argument. Because as soon as you talk about the process, you can change the process. It's that simple. When clients come in with me and they go, look, and I get this all the time. Clients come in and they say, look, I want some help, but I don't want any hypnosis. And I go, great. So you came to a hypnotist because you don't want hypnosis. And they say, well, I know you do other things, and I know, but I believe that hypnosis is bad. It's evil. It's wrong. And I can't be that out of control. And I go, out of control, out of control. I go, you're not out of control. You just don't want anything that will help you, that will help you, that will help you. Out of control, out of control. Okay, I won't use any hypnosis. I know, no, can't. Afraid, afraid, afraid. Condition yellow, condition red. Scotty, the crystals are about to burn. And they'll immediately go, are you making fun of me? And I go, he speaks. See, I'm not answering them. I'm talking about what they're doing. And I'm going, he wonders. He's not ready to go into a trance yet, but soon. I think he will. What do you think? And they'll go, well, I don't want to use any hypnosis. And I go, he won't use hypnosis. He'll just go into a trance without it. Because when I talk about him rather than talking to you, it's a whole different thing. It's another form of communication. When I mix the levels of my communication and I look at you and I say, oh, okay, now, he doesn't know what's going to happen, but he does. See, it begins to separate things. You begin to create concepts inside of people. Since there are so many already, it's easy to create new ones. And if you aim them towards success, it's really very easy to get people to turn the corner. Now, the technique that I just used with him dates back really a long time ago. I did this with a client, and actually, I did not realize that this was a hypnotic induction. I didn't know hypnosis yet. I did this years ago, and I did it because a guy kept saying to me, he kept going like this. He goes, well, he said, you know, on one hand, I look at myself as being really fucked up and screwed up with nothing but problems. And on the other hand, I see a lot of potential in myself. And I kept going like this. I said, really? And he goes, yeah. He goes, you know, he said, if I could just reach out to this, you know, and put some of this together, you know, he said, then I wouldn't feel like such an idiot all the time, and like my life is nothing, and like I'm just miserable, and like I'm doomed. And I thought, like that, and I said, okay. I said, now, see yourself being doomed. Hold yourself out here. And I said, and then see all these things you really want. I said, you see this one? Now look at that one. And I said, now take these things, and I want you to slowly pull them together until they merge into one thing. Now, as a hypnotist, I realize that when you do that, you get full-arm catalepsy,